this video, I'm going to get you to hit your irons more solid. I get lots of people messaging me, coming for lessons and saying, Chris, I just love to hit my irons more solid. I'm not getting the distance that I want. And there's very often a couple of really simple steps that can help these golfers, so I know that they can help you as well. We're going to cover those. Let's start down here on the ground because there's something we kind of have to understand which is really important. You can see I've put some kind of golf balls out on the ground here. How many have I got? 7. Now, this one, let's say, is the golf ball that I'm going to hit. We have to understand that the golf club in a golf swing is never moving in straight lines. So we can't have the club traveling towards your target for the entirety of the golf swing. It just doesn't work like that. We stand to the side of the ball, the club is on an angle, the club works on an arc. So if this was the golf ball that I was hitting, might be a little bit extreme, but my golf club is going to basically work in and through the golf ball on this arc. So you can see how the path of my golf club relative to the target is always changing. These golf balls here, at this point, my club is traveling more out to the right. It's traveling pretty straight here. And then at this point, it's traveling to the left. So the golfers who generally struggle with strike and struggle with their irons are very often swinging across the golf ball from out to in. And you might have videoed your golf swing or ever maybe got some data and you've seen that. The good news is that there will be a part of your golf swing which is in to out. We just need to make sure that's where you're hitting the golf ball, not on this part here. If you're hitting any golf shot on this part of your arc, you're out to win. That's not going to be the best way to put some compression. We want to be hitting the golf ball slightly in to out, if not pretty straight. That's going to give you the best results. So how do we do that? Well, what we've kind of just explained there is it's solid golf shots really come from hitting the golf ball at the right part of the swing. As we hit the ball earlier in the arc, the club is generally traveling more out to the right and it's also traveling more down. 2 things that most golfers need if they're struggling with strike. So the first thing I always look at and I always want golfers to check is where the ball is relative to you. Now, you'll know that as ball position. However, I don't want you to think of the ball position as just inside the lead heel, middle of the heels, back of the heels. That's a good reference, but it's not the best one. We have to think of it relative to your sternum. This golf club is being swung around your body, and this is kind of the center point. So if the golf ball is forward of my sternum, then the club is more likely to be arcing in. If it's behind my sternum, it's more likely to be swinging out to the right. So I could take a setup and have the ball right in the middle of my heels, and I give myself a big tick, and that's correct. But if my upper body's tipped this way, then relative to me, that ball is forward. But relative to the feet, it looks okay. So I'm going to take my golf club, I'm going to hold it right on the bottom of my button and just let it hang. And I can see where that club hangs relative to my heels. And I need to make sure that my sternum is right in the middle of my heels. That's really key. And then I can position the golf ball relative to that. So for this, I have got a 6 iron. I forgot then, I had to check. I want the ball fractionally forward of center. But that's fractionally forward of the center of me, my sternum. So here's my check point. That drops down. I can then double check that. Ball is forward. That gives me the okay. If I'm practicing an alignment stick down, a golf club down, just making sure that that's always in the right place is really key. So that's important. Don't get that ball too far forward. The next thing, which is often overlooked, is the grip. Where is that grip relative to the club head? Now we know we want that grip to be forward at impact. Most golfers are aware of that, but we want to set it a little bit forward as well. That really helps. If you're struggling with strike, setting the handle more forward can really help. It does a couple of things. I'm going to show you what they are. If I took a setup here, as my hands go more forwards, it generally means that the low part of my swing is going to happen after the ball. If the low part of my swing is happening after the ball, by definition, that means we hit the ball slightly before the low point. And what we've kind of said is the earlier we can hit the ball in that arc, then the better we're going to be, the more solid we're going to hit it. So having the handle a little bit more forward at setup is generally going to be advantageous if you're struggling with the irons. You start going really extreme and you start to really throw your body angles off. And if ever I do a video on impact and talking about hands forward, the common question is, well, why can't I just set myself up there? Why can't I just set the hands forward? And you can a little bit, but if you start going to where impact really is, you start to really throw off the body position. So I would be going board nice, position relative to the sternum, handle forwards. That's my second point. And then the third thing will be just making sure that my hips are slightly forward as well, putting a little bit more weight on my lead side. Notice how that doesn't really affect my kind of upper body, just my lower body. Again, that's just going to help with my setup and impact. So I'm creating a scenario where I'm not guaranteeing anything. We can't guarantee anything at setup, but we can make things more likely. By setting up that way and making sure I've got those things in place, I've increased the likelihood of me delivering the club on a more functional delivery with a pretty good path and a pretty good low point. I could mess it all up in the golf swing, but I've got myself off to a better start. So when we're looking at the swing, and we are specifically looking at irons here, the other thing that can really, really help is just making sure that in transition, you are shifting across into your lead side. If we look at what the greats do, the best players in the world, and we look at what the amateurs do, weight shift is one big thing that separates the two. And when we're talking weight shift, there's two things that we really have to look at: how much and when. A really elite golfer will generally shift more and earlier. You contrast that to the golfers who struggle. They often shift not enough, and that shift often happens late. And what we find then is, because I'm not shifting enough forwards, it means that my golf club is striking the ball later in its arc. And what we said at the start is when we hit things later in the arc, it's likely to be more shallow, more across, and then we get those kind of wipey shots where we don't get the strike, it drifts off to the right and it's pretty high. And we might get a decent result, but it doesn't feel compressed, doesn't feel solid. So what we have to do is make sure that we are shifting across really early. So I want you to really, really feel like by the time you get your hands to around about chest height in the downswing, you have already got the majority of your weight through this leg. And trust me, that is going to feel super early. And the only way you can do that is start that process before the golf club finishes its movement away. This little rehearsal that I'm doing here is a great one. I'm lifting the lead heel a little bit and I'm pushing down as I transition. Now, I'm making that a little extreme. There's probably a little bit too much movement there, but I'm creating a feel. I'm creating a feel I'm able to take to the golf swing in a moment to create the movements that I want. So no reason whilst doing this, you can't make these a little bit more extreme. But the more I can do this, the more likely I am to get my handle forwards and we hit that ball earlier in the arc. And that one was perfect. Turned it over a little bit, but the strike was really solid. And that little shape of that right to left is going to be absolutely fine if you're someone really struggling with the irons. The final thing we have to just be aware of, we spoke about how the arc of the club is always changing. With that arc, the club face is changing. So have a look at the club face here. This one is pretty square, but as I move my club in an arc, the earlier we hit the golf ball, that's beneficial for the path and the attack angle. The club face is likely to be a little bit more open. Okay, you can probably see a little bit more of that club face than you can of this club face. So when we hit the ball earlier in the arc, we can potentially hit shots which go out to the right. That was pretty heavy, but you can see that it's gone way out to the right. So we have to make sure that if we're going to add these things in the setup, we are controlling the face as well. So the only thing I want you to do here, and this is just really key, nice little point to finish on, is just try and make sure that through impact, you're trying to feel like the toe of the golf club, that's this part here, is overtaking the heel. So just moving this way through impact a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to mean that the club face gets a little bit better, or it gets aligned more matched to the path that you've got. And honestly, if you can just do these really simple little things, change when your club hits the board in the arc, you'll start to strike it better, you'll start to be, more compression, it's going to feel much better, hopefully a little bit like this. And I would not have that one back. Really quite simple tips, but can be massively effective if you're someone struggling with those irons.